Our Torah portion this week is Parshat Korach. I'm sure many know the story of Korach. The name is attached to this rebellion, this big, the uprising that Korach causes in the Torah portion. And all of this happens in light of the parasha that we read last week was all about the 12 spies that go in to scout out the land, and they come back with mostly not so good comments, and quite little confidence comes out of the report. When they've been walking through the desert and they finally get to this promised land, the 12 representatives, our 12 leaders from each of our tribes, come back with very little courage. And because of this, God decides that we're not really ready. As a people, we're not ready to enter the promised land. And we're kind of sentenced to more wandering until a new generation is born, we're taught. One that has more courage. And now, understandably, I think Bnei Israel is quite frustrated at this. They have been walking through the desert. They've been hard at work building the Mishkan, taking the Mishkan down, moving it across, rebuilding it. They have been through a lot. And I can only imagine that what got them through all of that, or one of the many things that got them through all of that, was the light at the end of the tunnel, the carrot at the end of the stick, the promised land that they're making their way to. And then when they finally get there, they're told, actually, it's not for you. It's not for you. It's for the next generation, your offspring, the next generation. So I think with all of that kind of stirring, I imagine that Bnei Israel must be pretty unhappy and pretty frustrated, which I can only imagine is what led to this uprising, or what led to the uprising being possible at this point in the Torah. I want to say, no matter what Korach's intentions were, or no matter what Korach was trying to fight with leading this rebellion, I think the people felt frustrated and were ready to join this this group that were questioning the leadership, questioning the status quo. And the Torah paints this picture that the rebellion was pretty big. It was great. And many of Bnei Israel actually joined Korach in this uprising. So if we can understand why they're quite upset, and so many of Bnei Israel stood by Korach in this rebellion, I think we have to ask, so why did some of the Korach and some of the people rebelling die? And why couldn't Moses and Aaron hear what they were trying to say and see their side? What was going on here? Why did these quite harsh events unfold after such a great moment where we reach the promised land and there's excitement in the air, and then we're faced with this rebellion and uprising? Quite a sad moment. So there are a few rationals behind the reasoning of us not being allowed in the promised land. The rabbis teach us that the people who entered the promised land needed to know nothing of slavery. They needed to enter with the confidence of a new nation being born, which, okay, I can get behind that. But what I think is so important for us to read this parasha, or why it's so important for us to continue to read this parasha, is more about reminding us that we have and we need different kinds of leaders in different times. And being reminded of Korach's story is a reminder that perhaps Korach his leadership wasn't needed in that moment for those circumstances. But we're also taught that the Torah doesn't waste words, And so it's important for us to remember Korach and the way that Korach led, because perhaps in other situations, in other circumstances, Korach's leadership is something that we need. We often hear that Moshe was righteous in his time, so as to not compare the leaders, because they faced different challenges in their different times, and they needed different leadership. And Moses was a great leader in the desert, but perhaps would probably not have known how to lead the people once they got into the Promised Land. And again, we see these different kinds of leaders needed in different times of our history. So while Korach's fight for what we read is actually democracy and a change in leadership or just leadership, perhaps didn't make sense in the space that they were in, right? And the plight of entering the Promised Land. But we still read his story to remind us of his leadership, which most certainly, to me, feels needed in moments that we live in right now, in the world that we're living in right now. I think we are absolutely looking for leaders who are willing to stand up to the status quo, to stand up to the leadership, and fight for democracy, for equality and the rights of others. So with all of that in mind, I hope that we can take notes of leadership from Moses and Aaron and Miriam, and yes, Korach too, but learn and make sure to apply their leadership, their insights, to the right time and the right spaces. I hope this week's Parshat and the story of uprising and rebellion, that as Jews and as South African Jews, a story that we know really well. The stories of uprisings and rebellion that we have in our own history. May this week's Parshat inspire us to continue to fight for democracy and just leadership, and for the freedom of all, as Korach did. That's what he was trying to do. And may it be done in everything that we do and in all the many different ways that we embody leadership in our lives. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos.